Imagine this. A bustling colonial town, late 17th century, a simple quarrel over property maybe, or just a perceived slight. And within months, that disagreement spirals into a terrifying accusation: witchcraft. A 9-year-old girl has a convulsive fit, and suddenly, a quiet, elderly woman across town, maybe someone people disliked for being a bit too independent, she's dragged from her home, hauled into court, and ultimately hanged. 19 people hanged on Gallows Hill. One man pressed to death in this horrifically public spectacle, and hundreds more accused, thrown in jail, their lives just utterly shattered. It sounds like a dark fable, doesn't it? I mean, from our modern perspective, it's almost unbelievable. But what if I asked you, could you have been accused in that kind of environment? What makes a society turn on itself with such terrifying speed and, well, such unwavering conviction? Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging headfirst into one of the most chilling and I think profoundly impactful chapters in American history, the Salem Witch Trials of 1692. This isn't just some dusty historical anecdote, something confined to the past. It's really a living, breathing cautionary tale about the devastating power of fear, the catastrophic breakdown of justice, and the chilling susceptibility of human beings to forces that can utterly override reason, compassion, and frankly, common sense.
And that's precisely why Salem continues to resonate so deeply with us today.
You're absolutely right. The events of 1692 are far more than just unique historical oddities. They're not just weird footnotes. Instead, they offer this profound, almost allegorical demonstration of human susceptibility to fear, and the devastating breakdown of justice that can happen when that fear really takes hold.
Like Arthur Miller's play, The Crucible. That's probably the most famous example.
Exactly. Miller's seminal play wasn't just a historical drama. It was a powerful, explicit parallel he drew between Salem and the McCarthy-era witch hunts of the 1950s. The play highlights how easily a society, convinced of some invisible, pervasive enemy, can just turn on itself, driven by baseless accusations and this zealous, perceived need for purity.
And it still feels relevant, even now. It does. Even contemporary analyses still emphasize that the insecurities, the social and political dynamics, the psychological vulnerabilities present in Salem, they remain strikingly applicable today. It reminds us that governments, and even everyday individuals, sometimes inadvertently, can enable the spread of misinformation and persecution, creating an environment ripe for what we still refer to as witch hunts. The very fact that we consistently pull Salem out of the history books to explain current events, well, that speaks volumes about its enduring, unsettling relevance.
So, it's definitely not just a historical footnote. It's more like a mirror for our own anxieties, even today. Our mission today is to truly unpack these layers, to reveal the terrifying, insidious power of accusation and fear, and to draw vital, tangible lessons for your understanding of how societies can be swayed, how rumor can become truth, and how reason can just evaporate. We're going to examine the precise, maybe uncomfortable conditions that can make anyone vulnerable in similar circumstances, even you today. We'll be distilling key insights from a whole range of sources: historical accounts, analyses, cutting-edge psychological research, to get to the core of what happened, and then maybe more importantly, why it still matters to you, the listener. So let's dig in. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's try to imagine colonial Massachusetts, late 17th century. It wasn't just a place people lived. It was a society deeply, deeply rooted in Puritan theology. This wasn't just a religion you practice on Sundays, right? It was more like the entire operating system for their lives. It shaped everything from their government to the most intimate, personal, moral decisions.
Exactly. The Puritans who settled the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1630, they were on a deeply significant mission. Their unwavering goal was to establish what they famously called a city on a hill, a perfect utopian society that would adhere strictly, uncompromisingly, to what they believed were God's wishes.
And that directly impacted how they governed.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh.
It wasn't just a spiritual aspiration for individuals, it directly translated into their governance. Their government was largely a theocracy. Religious laws and principles guided every aspect of civic life. Initially, voting rights were limited exclusively to church members. That was fundamental.
So if you didn't fit the mold religiously...
You weren't just disagreed with, you were often expelled, like Roger Williams, who argued for religious freedom and separation of church and state, or Anne Hutchinson, who dared to challenge male religious authority and interpret scripture herself. They were seen as direct threats to the very fabric of this divinely ordained society, not just, dissenting voices.
So their entire worldview was filtered through this lens of an all-powerful, watchful God, but also a very active, malevolent devil. And their core beliefs were pretty intense, weren't they? Take predestination, for example. That sounds like a truly paralyzing belief system. How did people even function knowing their fate was already sealed? What is the psychological impact of that?
It was foundational, and you're right, the psychological burden was immense. Predestination meant God had already decided from the moment of creation whether you were destined for salvation or eternal damnation.
Wow. No pressure then.
Right. It created this immense, pervasive spiritual anxiety. People constantly searched for evidence of their own spiritual state. While you couldn't change your predestined fate that was already decided, your actions, your outward piety, your holy deeds, your moral rectitude, even your frugal, industrious lifestyle, those were seen as evidence that you were among God's elected.
Ah. So it wasn't about earning salvation, but proving you already had it.
Precisely. It was about finding signs that you were already chosen. A constant, often exhausting quest for reassurance. This placed an enormous psychological burden on individuals to live a life that appeared righteous, to constantly scrutinize their own souls and, well, the souls of their neighbors for any hint of divine favor or, chillingly, divine disfavor.
And you mentioned the devil earlier. This constant battle between God and the devil was central.
Absolutely central. This worldview was entirely dominated by the belief in a constant, active, and very tangible battle. The devil wasn't just an abstract concept, not a metaphor. He was a literal, ever-present force, actively seeking to lure people into sin, take over their souls, and undermine the whole Puritan experiment.
So sin was obviously unacceptable, but what about just enjoying life?
Well, ironically, anything pleasurable that brought too much happiness or worldly indulgence was often viewed with suspicion, seen as the devil's subtle way of tempting individuals away from God's path, maybe into spiritual complacency.
And within that framework, witchcraft wasn't just a minor offense.
Not at all. It was considered a capital crime of the highest order. It wasn't just a transgression, it was understood as a direct covenant, a literal pact with the devil himself. This included not just overt acts like casting curses, but even what they might call little sorceries, fortune-telling, palm reading, using charms.
Okay.
This theological bedrock provides the fundamental why for the witch hunt mentality. They weren't just prosecuting criminals, they believed they were actively fighting a cosmic battle against Satan's earthly agents, purifying their divine mission.
Wow, so they were literally fighting a spiritual war on their doorsteps. That creates a very rigid, deeply spiritual, internal world. But it wasn't just about internal beliefs. They were under immense pressure from outside, too, weren't they? Facing some serious political turmoil. What did that feel like for them?
Oh, absolutely. The colony was reeling from significant political upheaval in the years leading up to 1692. Created a profound sense of instability, insecurity. A huge blow came in 1684 when the Crown revoked Massachusetts Bay's original charter.
That was a big deal.
Huge. It didn't just jeopardize their autonomy, their ability to elect their own officials, make their own laws. It even threatened existing land titles. For many devout Puritans, this was interpreted as nothing less than the downfall of the great Puritan experiment. A clear sign God was abandoning them, or maybe actively punishing them. This fueled a deep, collective spiritual anxiety, permeated everything.
They felt their world was crumbling.
Pretty much. Their world built on divine promise.
And then England had its own revolution, the Glorious Revolution. That must have just compounded the sense of chaos over here.
Exactly. The Glorious Revolution in England, 1688-1689, further destabilized the region. It led to the popular overthrow of the highly unpopular Crown-appointed Governor Andros in Boston, created a significant vacuum of political authority.
So who was in charge?
Well, for a chaotic period, a temporary government, desperately trying to mimic the old charter, was put in place, just trying to maintain some order. But the sense of instability, uncertainty, it was palpable, widespread. And then a new charter was granted in 1691, but it contained a clause that was a profound shock to many Puritans.
What was that?
It abolished the requirement for voters to be church members.
Ah, that must have hit hard.
Devastating blow for many, seen as yet another sign of the Puritan experiment's decline, further eroding the spiritual foundation of their city on a hill.
Right.
Deepening their spiritual malaise. It felt like their entire societal structure, painstakingly built on religious principles, was being dismantled.
So this political chaos meant there was no strong, stable central authority to step in and, quell the rising panic or enforce traditional legal safeguards when things started to go south. It sounds like a perfect storm for things to unravel.
You're absolutely right. This political vacuum created a collective psychological vulnerability across the colony. Without a firm, legitimate hand to guide the legal process, restore order, or calm the burgeoning public anxieties, society truly became a powder keg, where existing grudges, fears, internal conflicts could easily ignite into widespread paranoia. It meant that once the panic started, there was no strong systemic check, no overarching authority to stop it from spiraling wildly out of control. The very institutions designed to maintain order were themselves compromised or just absent, leaving a terrified populace to seek their own forms of justice.
And within Salem Village itself, it was anything but harmonious. I've heard there were deep internal divisions, even bitter feuds. So these weren't just abstract disagreements, but really personal, day-to-day conflicts.
Yes, Salem Village, specifically, was a hotbed of internal infighting, far from unified or harmonious. Constant, long-standing land disputes, bitter family rivalries, sometimes stretching back generations, and significant friction, particularly between factions loyal to and opposing their divisive minister, Reverend Samuel Parris.
So long simmering feuds, just waiting for an excuse to boil over.
Pretty much. Imagine these disputes, fueled by property lines, personal slights, just waiting for an opportunity. These weren't just disagreements, they were personal, deeply entrenched antagonisms between neighbors living side by side.
And I remember reading something about economic changes playing a role too. Was there a sense that their traditional way of life was being threatened?
Absolutely. An emerging capitalist economy, focusing on individual enterprise, wealth accumulation. It was clashing profoundly with the traditional Puritan communal ideals. Those ideals prioritized collective welfare, religious unity.
So the older guard didn't like it.
Many traditional farmers resented this shift. They saw the rise of commerce, individual wealth, as almost sacrilegious. The devil's work, even. A fundamental attack on John Winthrop's original vision of united, cooperative body politic. They saw it as a stark deviation from God's intended path, adding another layer of anxiety about moral decay.
So all this internal friction meant that social tensions already existed, ripe for exploitation. It sounds like they were looking for an explanation for all their problems.
Precisely. The community was already looking for explanations for its internal strife, its economic anxieties, its crumbling political certainties. The search for a tangible enemy witches offered a convenient outlet, a deceptively simple explanation for these complex, overwhelming problems.
The scapegoat.
Exactly. It allowed the community to externalize its deep-seated internal conflicts and anxieties onto a perceived other, a scapegoat, rather than addressing the uncomfortable, divisive truths within. It provided a clear target for their collective frustrations.
And if that wasn't enough, just daily life was terrifying for them, wasn't it? Beyond the political and internal issues, there were constant external threats.
Yes, the pressures were relentless, terrifying. The colony was embroiled in King William's War with French colonists and Native American tribes from 1688 to 1697. This conflict brought a huge influx of refugees into Salem, especially from frontier towns. Led to overcrowding, rising casualties, increased taxes for the war costs.
And disease.
On top of that, yes, recent smallpox epidemics had swept through, leaving a trail of death and trauma. And the ever-present threat of Native American attacks on their frontiers kept general fear and anxiety extremely high. People lived with a constant sense of vulnerability.
And even things we'd consider just bad luck today, a failed harvest, sick livestock, they saw differently.
Exactly. Even natural disasters, crop failures, drought, livestock dying off,
Yep.
not seen as random. In their deeply religious worldview, every misfortune had a divine or demonic cause, interpreted as God's will specifically, as direct punishment for sins, or as the malicious work of the devil through his human agents.
So if you suffered, it was either God punishing you or the devil attacking you.
That was the framework. If God was angry, it was due to sin. If the devil was active, he used human agents, witches.
So what does this all mean when you put all these pieces together? The rigid beliefs, political turmoil, social divisions, external threats, daily misfortunes. You get a powder keg ready to explode.
You truly do. This confluence of factors, all these pressures coming together at once, transformed everyday misfortune from random events into undeniable evidence of spiritual warfare. In a society where God's will and the devil's influence were daily, tangible realities, unexplained suffering couldn't be random. It had to have a spiritual cause.
Right.
If God was punishing them, it was due to their collective sin. If the devil was active, he used human agents, witches. This worldview provided a powerful, undeniable internal logic for the witch hunt, made identifying and purging witches a perceived societal, spiritual, existential imperative.
Not just about punishing criminals, but about cleansing the town.
It's exactly cleansing the town of Satan's influence, getting back on the path to righteousness to appease God and defeat the devil. It made pursuing witches a moral and existential duty for everyone. And this creates a profoundly dangerous psychological vulnerability. When people feel helpless, Anxious, overwhelmed by uncontrollable events, they instinctively seek explanations and control.
Makes sense.
If rational explanations fail, spiritual ones are readily adopted because they offer a clear narrative, a tangible enemy. This highlights how critical faculties diminish when fear is sufficiently high, leads to abandoning reasoned justice for a clear enemy and the simple, albeit false, solution. The trials, in many ways, were about managing collective anxiety through a ritualized process of scapegoating.
A desperate way to feel like they were doing something.
Anything, really, to regain a sense of control over their rapidly unraveling world.
So the stage is set for disaster. The air is thick with fear and suspicion, and then a spark ignites the powder keg. Starting with a 9-year-old girl and her cousin. Here's where it gets chillingly personal.
It started very abruptly. A sudden, intense onset. January 1692. Betty Parris, the 9-year-old daughter of Reverend Samuel Parris, and her 11-year-old cousin, Abigail Williams, began exhibiting deeply alarming symptoms.
What kind of symptoms?
They'd convulse violently, make strange guttural sounds described as barking, like dogs speak in strange unintelligible tongues, writhe on the floor as if in agony, scream uncontrollably.
That sounds terrifying.
It was truly disturbing, a spectacle no one in the community could explain.
And it wasn't just them. It sounds like these behaviors became almost contagious, spreading to other girls pretty quickly, right?
Yes. Soon after, other girls from prominent families like Ann Putnam Jr., who was about 12, Mary Walcott, Mercy Lewis, some are also refugees from frontier attacks, started displaying very similar dramatic behaviors.
What did they report feeling?
They reported sensations of being pricked by needles, pinched, burned, or bitten by invisible forces, made odd, contorted movements. These fits were so disruptive, so dramatic, they could interrupt solemn sermons with what were called sacrilegious outbursts. They even claimed to cause Bibles to be flung across the room in front of the horrified congregation. It was chaotic, terrifying, completely inexplicable to them.
So, when conventional medicine failed, how did the community interpret these incredibly strange and violent behaviors? Especially Reverend Parris. Why not see it as illness?
Well, given the prevailing Puritan worldview we've discussed, where the devil was a tangible, active force when medicine offered no physical reason, these behaviors were immediately, almost universally, attributed to a spiritual cause: demonic possession and witchcraft.
And Parris felt pressured.
Immense pressure. From his congregation, his own beliefs, he pressed the girls to identify their tormentors. This pressure, combined with the community's ready acceptance of spiritual explanations, quickly led to the initial accusations. Plus, a local doctor, Dr. William Griggs, after examining them and finding no natural cause, concluded they were under an evil hand.
A diagnosis of bewitchment?
Exactly. And that doctor's pronouncement further legitimized the spiritual explanation. Crucially, it shifted blame from the girls to external malevolent forces. This confirmation of existing anxieties provided a clear, actionable target for the community to combat.
And the girls' claims of seeing specters.
Right, spectral images of witches tormenting them. That became a crucial, terrifying form of evidence in the trials that followed.
Of course, today we have very different ideas about what might have been going on. Historians, scholars over centuries have proposed many modern theories, looking for a more scientific explanation.
Absolutely. Over centuries, various theories have emerged, trying to explain these behaviors through a modern lens. Some historians suggest classic mass hysteria, psychological contagion causing widespread physical and emotional symptoms among a vulnerable population.
Or deliberate fraud.
That's another theory. Deliberate fraud by some accusers, maybe seeking attention or settling scores. Still others propose underlying mental illnesses or neurological conditions. And one very famous, enduring theory is convulsive ergotism.
Right, the fungus on rye bread.
Exactly. A condition caused by a fungus that grows on rye and other grains, especially in damp conditions. It can induce symptoms eerily similar to those described: violent convulsions, delusions, vomiting, muscle spasms.
And there are even more specific medical possibilities, aren't there? Shows how complex these seemingly simple symptoms could be.
Indeed. Other theories include more specific conditions: severe asthma, encephalitis, Lyme disease, epilepsy. Some scholars have even proposed PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Especially for the refugee girls.
Particularly given that some, like Mercy Lewis, were refugees from King William's War, may have experienced traumatic attacks firsthand. The idea is their bodies and minds were reacting to profound, unaddressed trauma. There's also the idea of fantasy proneness.
Explain that one.
It's a psychological trait where individuals are highly imaginative, prone to vivid fantasies. Could have been linked to childhood trauma. allowed them to genuinely believe in the fantastical supernatural phenomena they described, blurring the lines between reality and imagination.
Okay.
But what's crucial, regardless of the specific modern theory we consider, is how the prevailing belief system at the time immediately interpreted these unexplainable symptoms. The instant diagnosis was demonic activity, provided a clear enemy to combat.
So it bypassed any rational inquiry.
Completely. Instead of seeking physical or psychological causes, the community jumped straight to the supernatural, directly fueling the witch hunt mentality. It gave a physical, terrifying manifestation to the abstract concept of evil, made it easier for a fearful community to point fingers and demand action, created the explosive spark for the trials.
But here's the truly surprising twist about these afflicted girls. Typically, young girls in that highly stratified society, they belong to the least powerful, most silenced minority group. Virtually no voice, no standing, no authority. Yet through their accusations, they gained something unprecedented. What was that like for them and for the community?
It's one of the most striking and unsettling aspects. These girls, with virtually no social standing or power in a highly patriarchal, adult-dominated society, gained unprecedented authority and recognition through their dramatic accusations.
Suddenly, everyone was listening to them.
Exactly. Their tales of affliction granted them access to public power they'd never known, placed them literally at the center stage of the community's attention. Being demonically afflicted became a recognized social role with clear expectations for behavior, a kind of celebrity status in this terrifying drama.
And it protected them.
Ironically, yes. Adopting this role was, paradoxically, the only ironclad way to prevent accusations of witchcraft against oneself. It became a perverse form of immunity, a shield.
Wow!
This created a powerful and deeply disturbing self-perpetuating cycle. The girls weren't just experiencing symptoms, they were, in a sense, performing a recognized social role that brought them immense power, attention, validation.
Validation they wouldn't normally get.
Precisely. In a society where they typically had none. This positive reinforcement incentivized the continuation and escalation of their symptoms and accusations. It created a chilling feedback loop. More drama meant more power and validation, encouraging others to adopt similar behaviors, maybe even feign them, to gain protection or influence. This dynamic transformed individual afflictions into a collective performative hysteria that truly became the engine of the trials. It shows how the demand characteristics of an environment, the subtle cues from authorities, the court, the community, can shape behavior to meet societal expectations. In this case, expectations of bewitchment.
The community expected spectral attacks.
And the girls, consciously or not, provided them.
So the stage is set. The spark has ignited. Now, who got caught in this terrifying web? You might initially think it was just the obvious weirdos or people on the fringes, but as the hysteria mounted, the net widened, demonstrating how fear erodes protections and targets anyone.
That's a critical point. It's where the true terror of the escalation became clear. The trials began with 3 women who were indeed easy targets for initial scapegoating due to their social standing and perceived nonconformity.
Who were they again?
Tituba, an indigenous slave woman from Barbados, an immediate outsider with different cultural practices. Sarah Good, an irascible beggar known for being disagreeable, muttering curses. And Sarah Osborne, an elderly, bedridden woman who hadn't regularly attended church for over a year, a significant transgression in Puritan society.
So textbook outsiders.
Exactly. They'd already violated the cultural and religious expectations of the dominant social group. Their race, low status, perceived deviance, lack of male protection made them convenient initial targets for a community desperately seeking to externalize anxieties and find a tangible enemy. They fit the existing stereotypes of a witch. Made their accusations immediately credible to a fear-ridden populace. They were the low-hanging fruit, so to speak.
What's fascinating here is a clear pattern emerges around gender. A significant majority of the accused were women. So this wasn't just about the devil, but about social control, about norms for women.
Yes, a clear and undeniable pattern. A significant majority were women, often seen as inherently inferior to men, thus more susceptible to the devil's influence. This belief was deeply rooted in traditional interpretations of Adam and Eve's temptation, seen as evidence of female weakness, moral vulnerability.
So who specifically got targeted?
Accusations frequently targeted women who showed independence or stepped outside traditional roles. Women who were assertive, outspoken, perhaps too successful in business, those who lived alone or on the margins of society, unmarried women, widows who inherited property, those who simply didn't conform to the prescribed image of subservience and piety.
Single women especially.
Yes, single women were noted as being at exceptionally high risk. In this highly patriarchal structure, witchcraft accusations functioned as a kind of societal defense mechanism against women who strayed from the prescribed norm of subservience and passivity.
The idea of a witch became tied to fears of female rebellion.
Exactly. Puritan society was explicitly very patriarchal and hierarchical. By accusing and punishing women who didn't conform to the Puritan perception of ideal womanhood, the community reinforced its strict gender norms. This suggests the fear of the devil was intricately intertwined with, maybe amplified by, a deeper societal anxiety about changing power dynamics and female autonomy.
So the trials were also about reinforcing gender roles.
While ostensibly about rooting out Satan, yes, they also served a powerful social control function, a brutal means of purifying not just religious sin, but also social deviance from established gender roles.
But it didn't stop there. This wasn't just about the marginalized or nonconformists. The net widened considerably, and this is where it gets truly terrifying, because it started to include prominent community members. What did it mean when accusations hit closer to home?
That's where the true terror of the escalation became chillingly clear. As the trials progressed, hysteria mounted. The scope of accusations extended far beyond the initial, easily marginalized targets. The net widened to include socially prominent people with wealth and influence, respected church members, merchants, even clergymen.
Nobody was safe.
At a certain point, no one was exempt from suspicion. The chilling reality was that anyone, no matter their Puritan purity, might find themselves facing the gallows simply by virtue of an accusation.
Can you give us some vivid examples of these prominent individuals? That must have sent shockwaves.
Absolutely. Notable examples included Reverend George Burroughs, a respected, educated minister from Wells, Maine, who'd previously served in Salem Village. His execution was particularly unsettling, especially because he recited the Lord's Prayer perfectly on the gallows, something a witch supposedly couldn't do, stirred significant unease. Other respected community members. Martha Corey, an outspoken woman who expressed skepticism about the girl's claims. Rebecca Nurse, an elderly, respected, pious woman whose family had long-standing disputes with the accusers' families. John and Elizabeth Proctor, a prosperous couple who also openly doubted the accusers. John Proctor famously said, "If she his maid go to the devil, I'll go with her."
Wow. And it reached the very top.
It did. The paranoia reached a critical, unsustainable point when even Governor William Phipps's own wife, Lady Mary Phipps, was accused. That accusation specifically was a major turning point. It directly threatened the highest echelons of power, contributed significantly to the governor eventually stepping in.
So how did targeting the marginalized pave the way for this?
Well, the initial targeting established a dangerous precedent and legitimized the accusations. Successfully accusing Tituba, Good, and Osborne, who fit the stereotype, gave the accusers and the court credibility. This initial success validated the whole process, the belief in active witchcraft, created a dangerous slippery slope.
Lowered the bar for suspicion.
Exactly. Lowered the societal threshold. Once the witch hunt gained momentum and legitimacy by targeting the vulnerable, the definition of suspect broadened dramatically. The community's collective fear, plus the accuser's newfound terrifying power, allowed them to extend accusations to literally anyone, including those previously protected by social standing. It demonstrated that in a climate of mass hysteria, no one is truly safe. The criteria for suspicion become increasingly arbitrary, driven purely by fear, not objective evidence or reason.
So when we look back, the characteristics that could put a target on your back were varied and, chillingly, could apply to almost anyone. You had your classic outsiders and marginalized, like Tituba and Sarah Good, viewed with suspicion already. Then, a huge category. Women who defied societal norms, many unnamed independent women who didn't fit the mold. There were community antagonists, people disliked or in disputes, giving enemies a powerful weapon, and terrifyingly prominent citizens like Minister Burroughs and even the governor's wife, proving no one was safe. And let's not forget refugees or displaced individuals like Mercy Lewis, lacking community ties, seen as foreign or burdensome.
This raises an important, uncomfortable question for us. How quickly and comprehensively can fear dismantle societal protections? Salem demonstrates with chilling clarity how a society, given a tangible outlet for its anxieties, can consume its own, regardless of social standing or reputation. It's a stark reminder of how fragile those protections can be when collective panic takes hold.
Okay, if the societal conditions were the dry kindling and the afflicted girls the spark, then the legal system in Salem was the accelerant, pouring fuel on the fire. It fundamentally undermined every principle of due process, creating this truly terrifying court of shadows.
Precisely. In response to the growing number of accusations, jailed individuals, Governor William Phipps, when he arrived in May 1692, established a special court, the Court of Oyer and Terminer, in June. Lieutenant Governor William Stoughton was its chief magistrate. The name Oyer and Terminer is Anglo-French, to hear and to determine.
Meaning get it done quickly.
Essentially, yes. Its purpose was to quickly process felony and misdemeanor cases, especially witchcraft accusations, clear the jails. The procedure was alarmingly swift. Complaint by an afflicted person, immediate arrest warrant, rapid examination by magistrates, immediate jailing if believed guilty, grand jury presentation with depositions, trial by jury, which almost inevitably led to conviction and hanging. The system was designed for speed and conviction, not meticulous justice or protecting the accused.
But at the very heart of this legal nightmare was spectral evidence. Sounds like something from a ghost story. Define it for us. Literally, your spirit could attack someone miles away, and that was proof.
It was exactly that deeply, terrifyingly subjective. Spectral evidence was testimony where a witness claimed the accused person's spirit or spectral shape appeared to them in a vision or dream, tormenting them, pinching them, choking them, even if the accused's physical body was somewhere else entirely, maybe locked in prison.
How could they possibly accept that?
Based on a deeply held Puritan belief, the devil and his minions were powerful enough to send spirits to afflict the pure, but crucially, the devil could not assume an innocent person's shape without their express consent.
So if someone saw your specter?
That claim was considered irrefutable proof of guilt. It was virtually impossible to refute because it relied solely on the victim's subjective testimony. Governed only by the limits of their fears and imaginations, there was no way for an accused person to prove a specter wasn't theirs.
Or that the devil could impersonate an innocent.
Exactly. And the accuser's dramatic fits in court, writhing, screaming, claiming invisible spectral attacks right there, added a sensational quality. It deeply swayed public and judicial opinion, making the evidence seem utterly compelling, undeniable.
It fundamentally inverted the burden of proof.
Completely. Made the accused guilty until proven innocent based on a vision or a dream, a court driven by fear and imagination, not evidence and reason.
Sounds like a legal black hole, but even at the time, this was radical, wasn't it? Was there debate about accepting it?
There was significant controversy, yes, even among legal and religious leaders. Using spectral evidence was a novelty in Salem, not in keeping with generally accepted procedure in English common law. English law typically required clear, concrete, convincing proof, often from two trustworthy people, not just subjective visions.
Did anyone push back?
Yes. Magistrate Nathaniel Saltonstall actually resigned from the court in disagreement over its use, right after Bridget Bishop's execution, the first hanging. His resignation was a powerful, if ultimately unheeded, protest.
So, not everyone was on board. What about prominent religious figures, like the Mathers?
Even highly influential ministers like Increase Mather, president of Harvard, and his son Cotton Mather, debated its validity. Increase Mather urged extreme caution, suggested spectral evidence might be sufficient to indict but insufficient to convict, because, he reasoned, the devil might well assume the image of an innocent person to deceive and persecute the righteous.
A crucial point. If the devil could mimic an innocent, the evidence proved nothing.
Right. But despite these misgivings, Cotton Mather, highly influential and a proponent of active witchcraft, cited a controversial precedent from 1664, where English legal authority Matthew Hale had admitted such evidence. This unfortunately influenced the Salem court's decision to accept it, legitimizing this deeply flawed subjective proof.
So there was disagreement, but fear won out.
It seems so. The internal conflict shows recognition of the dangers. But the prevailing, overwhelming fear, combined with the influence of figures like Cotton Mather, pushed for acceptance, led to a legal system where subjective, unprovable claims held more weight than objective facts, physical evidence, or reasoned argument. The courtroom became a theater. The accuser's performances and subjective claims mattered more than objective facts or alibis, stripping the accused of any meaningful defense.
And spectral evidence was just the tip of the iceberg, wasn't it? The whole system was skewed against the accused, designed, it seems, to produce convictions.
Absolutely. Beyond spectral evidence, several other highly problematic legal practices characterized the trials, fundamentally eroding any semblance of justice. For instance, the touching test.
What was that?
An afflicted person's violent spasms would reportedly cease if touched by the accused. Believed proof that only the witch who cast the spell could remove its effects. Pure superstition. There were also invasive examinations for witches' marks.
Moles or birthmarks.
Yes. Moles, birthmarks, other blemishes where familiars the devil's spirit helpers were thought to feed. These natural skin imperfections were taken as irrefutable signs of a diabolical pact.
And they admitted all sorts of dubious testimony. Gossip and rumor must have spread like wildfire.
Yes, a major procedural deviation. Hearsay, gossip, unsubstantiated rumors, unsupported assertions were generally admitted as evidence, stark contrast to modern legal standards. But perhaps most damning, the accused were largely deprived of the rights to which they should have been entitled under English common law.
No lawyers.
No legal counsel to represent them. Often faced hostile magistrates and accusers alone, couldn't have witnesses testify under oath on their behalf, lacked any formal avenues of appeal once convicted.
And confessions, even if clearly coerced, were highly prized. A cruel irony. Confess to a lie to save your life.
Exactly. Confessions, often obtained through psychological torment or outright physical coercion accused, were tortured or terrified into confessing, were highly valued as best proof. Ironically, often led to an unusually high conviction rate. The pressure to confess was immense, often the only perceived way to avoid immediate execution.
And Giles Corey.
The most chilling example, an 81-year-old farmer, accused, refused to submit to such a flawed trial, understanding a plea would legitimize it, chose not to plead at all. The court subjected him to pain forte dur, heavy stones piled on his chest day by day, hoping to force a plea. He was pressed to death agonizingly, declaring more weight to his tormentors, refusing to give the court the satisfaction.
And if you question the trial,
You risked being accused yourself, enforcing a chilling conformity, silencing any brave voices of dissent. The acceptance of spectral evidence fundamentally inverted the burden of proof, made the accused guilty until proven innocent, transformed subjective fear into irrefutable legal fact.
if the premise was the devil couldn't use an innocent specter without consent.
Then the mere claim of seeing a specter was proof of guilt. The accused had to prove a negative impossible within the court's framework, strip them of meaningful defense. The courtroom became a theater where accusers' performances mattered more than facts.
And the disregard for established procedures.
The complete disregard for English common law, lack of counsel, acceptance of coerced confessions, created a judicial environment where the goals shifted, from seeking justice to validating witchcraft and securing convictions at any cost. Salem procedures disregarded time-honored English rules of evidence, allowed hearsay, denied basic rights.
So the trials confirmed the belief in witchcraft.
Yes, they weren't about establishing guilt beyond reasonable doubt, but confirming the prevailing belief. The system was designed for convictions, and the high conviction rate was interpreted as terrifying evidence of mass allegiance to Satan, further fueling accusations, a vicious, self-perpetuating cycle.
The legal process became a tool of the hysteria.
Rather than a check on it. By validating accusations through convictions, the court inadvertently reinforced the community's paranoia. Each conviction made the next accusation more credible. Shows starkly how a legal system, stripped of fundamental protections, influenced by panic, becomes an instrument of profound injustice.
This truly lays out just how fundamentally flawed it was. You had spectral evidence, relying on subjective claims, inverting the burden of proof. Guilty until proven innocent. The touching test, pure superstition, coerced confessions, incentivizing false testimony to survive, a complete lack of legal counsel, denying fair defense, admission of hearsay and gossip, letting rumors decide fates, no sworn witnesses for defense limiting their ability to counter, no formal avenues of appeal, no safeguard, brutal punishment for refusal to plead, like Giles Corey's pressing. And chillingly, the risk of accusation for dissent. Question the trials, you could be next.
It highlights how a legal system, stripped of protections, overwhelmed by panic, transforms into an instrument of injustice. Shows the devastating consequences when fear-driven narratives dictate judicial outcomes, abandoning fairness, impartiality, due process for irrational demands for answers, and purification.
Okay, if you're a learner, this next part is vital. It's about the human psychology behind it all, how an entire society can plunge into collective delusion. The Salem Witch Trials weren't just legal proceedings, but a profound social and psychological phenomenon. Driven by this escalating, terrifying cycle of accusation, fear, mass hysteria, how does fear actually change how people think and behave?
That's absolutely right. A pervasive sense of fear and uncertainty gripped Salem, fueled by that perfect storm of external threats and internal anxieties we discussed. King William's War brought refugees, casualties, taxes, widespread external fear. Smallpox epidemics ravaged them. Native American attacks kept everyone on edge. Internally, deep religious anxieties about Puritan purity, economic changes, social divisions compounded the stress. The insidious belief that anyone in society could be a witch created intense, generalized fear, permeated daily life, made everyone suspicious of neighbors, even themselves.
So, this created a breeding ground for finding someone to blame, a collective psychological pressure to identify an enemy.
It did, a classic case of scapegoating. This climate fostered widespread scapegoating, a convenient outlet for existing social tensions, frustrations, economic grievances, complex problems with no easy answers. War, disease, hardship, instability were externalized onto witches.
And the initial targets fit the stereotypes.
Often, yes. Easy scapegoats due to status or perceived deviance, fitting pre-existing stereotypes. Some accusers, as we discussed, might have had high fantasy proneness, highly imaginative, prone to vivid fantasies, maybe linked to trauma. Allowed them to genuinely believe in the supernatural phenomena they described, blurring reality and their internal world, making accusations seem utterly sincere.
Humans need explanations, control.
Inherently. We seek explanations for the unknown, unpredictable, to gain security, control. In chaotic Salem, identifying witches provided a perceived, albeit false, sense of control over a frightening world. Furthermore, behavior was likely influenced by demand characteristics, unconscious cues from authorities, the court, the community, shaping responses to fit expected patterns of bewitchment or confession.
Like fulfilling expectations.
Kind of. If the community expected bewitchment, the girls, consciously or not, started performing what was expected. When fear is sufficiently high, critical faculties diminish. Leads to a desperate search for simple answers, even irrational ones.
So, how did this fear morph into accusations, especially given their deep religious beliefs? Sounds like authorities amplified it, not calmed it.
The Puritan belief system was absolutely central. It legitimized the devil's role, made his presence a daily reality, encouraged seeing his hand in every misfortune, made witchcraft accusations immediately credible, deeply alarming. When the afflicted girls showed strange symptoms, they weren't doubted. They were pitied and placed on center stage. Their behaviors taken as undeniable proof of demonic activity.
Created a sense of urgency.
Profound urgency led to a desperate community-wide attempt to cleanse the town, purge the perceived source of these demonic possessions. Hysteria was further amplified by influential figures like Cotton Mather, who initially supported the trials, lending them immense intellectual, spiritual credibility, made it nearly impossible to publicly doubt them without risk.
What's fascinating here is the whole process became a terrifying self-sustaining feedback loop. Just kept feeding itself, accelerating the madness. More confessions meant it seemed more real.
Exactly. A truly terrifying, self-reinforcing cycle. Accusations escalated from suspicions, rumors. Villagers felt emboldened to voice long-standing feuds, using witchcraft accusations as a potent weapon. For the accused, confessing, even if false, was often seen as a desperate way to evade the noose, potentially be rehabilitated into society, brought back into the Christian fold, spared execution.
A perverse incentive for false confessions.
Absolutely. Rewarding self-incrimination. The large number of confessions, genuine or coerced, was then interpreted by Puritans as terrifying evidence of mass allegiance to Satan, confirming their deepest fears, leading to even more accusations. A vicious, accelerating cycle. This system inadvertently created a perverse structure where hysteria literally fed on itself. Each confession, each execution seemed to validate the horrifying process, intensified panic, the perceived need to find more witches, drove the community deeper into delusion.
And if you dared to question it, you were in danger yourself, enforced incredible conformity. What if you were the one person saying, this doesn't feel right, this is illogical?
That was the chilling reality. The social environment actively enforced conformity, brutally punished dissent. Individuals who publicly questioned guilt, voiced skepticism, tried to defend the accused were themselves likely to be accused. A powerful disincentive for skepticism or offering defense.
Silenced critical voices.
Ensured compliance. Ostracism was a potent tool. Confessing, acknowledging the community's narrative, provided a perceived path back to acceptance, avoided further accusations. Puritans believed the community shared consequences, leading to collective actions against transgressors. To question the trials was to question God's will, aligned with the devil.
So what does this all mean? The terrifying power of accusation wasn't just the initial claims, but the systemic pressures, religious fervor, legal perversions, social dynamics, compelling participation in this cycle of denunciation and false testimony, as accusers or falsely confessing victims.
This exemplifies how a society under extreme stress can regress to primal fear responses. lead to collective delusion, where the psychological need for explanation and control overrides rational thought, due process. Society faced multiple overwhelming stressors: war, disease, instability, tension. Humans instinctively seek explanations for the unknown to gain security control. When rational explanations failed, spiritual ones, witchcraft, were readily adopted.
A clear cause for their suffering.
Exactly. The overwhelming threats created profound helplessness, anxiety. The mind seeks simple, definitive answers. The devil and witches provided a concrete, irrational explanation, allowed the community to believe they could regain control by eliminating the perceived evil. Highlights a dangerous psychological vulnerability. When fear is high, critical faculties diminish. Desire for a clear enemy, simple solution leads to collective delusion, abandoning justice principles. The trials were less about finding actual witches, more about managing collective anxiety through ritualized, violent scapegoating, a powerful, sobering lesson in collective psychology.
Thankfully, this dark chapter didn't last forever. Even in deeply entrenched systems of belief and fear, there can be a return to rationality and justice. Though it was slow, painful, and the scars remained.
Indeed. A crucial turning point came as imprisoned numbers approached 150, and crucially, as accusations targeted more prominent citizens. People of impeccable reputation, high standing, including Governor Phipps's own wife, Lady Mary Phipps.
That was the tipping point.
The moment public opinion slowly but surely began to shift decisively against the proceedings. Governor Phipps, likely influenced by the accusation against his wife, growing concerns about the chaos, obvious injustices, intervened. October 8, 1692, he issued a critical order. Reliance on spectral and other intangible evidence could no longer be allowed in trials, a direct blow to the foundation of convictions.
And what happened after that? Did the court continue without its primary evidence?
No. Just weeks later, October 29, 1692, Phipps took an even more decisive step, formally dissolved the Special Court of Oyer and Terminer, effectively shutting down the witchcraft trials, ordered the release of many imprisoned suspects, prohibited further arrests for witchcraft. A new body, the Superior Court of Judicature, replaced it. And here's the crucial part. This new court specifically did not allow spectral evidence.
Changed everything.
Led to an immediate, dramatic reduction in convictions.
Yeah.
Without that subjective, unprovable evidence, the vast majority of cases simply fell apart. No other tangible proof. This highlights a crucial dynamic. When the other became us, when hysteria threatened the power structure by consuming its own, targeting the highest levels, it triggered a necessary self-correction.
A reminder that mass hysteria can undo itself.
Often contains the seeds of its own undoing, yes. Particularly when it threatens the safety, stability, legitimacy of those who felt immune or in control. Signals the eventual, albeit slow, triumph of reason and conscience over collective delusion. Provides a blueprint for how societies can recover from such collective madness. Self-preservation of the powerful became the catalyst for justice for the innocent.
But the human cost of this madness was immense. Not just convictions, but lives shattered, families broken, reputations stained. Hard to grasp through statistics alone.
You're right, the toll was devastating, long-lasting. Between 141 and 185 people imprisoned, enduring horrific, unsanitary conditions, often shackled, starved. 19 individuals, 14 women, 5 men executed by hanging on Gallows Hill. And Giles Corey, over 80, pressed to death under heavy stones for refusing to submit. His dying words, "More weight," a legendary defiance.
And others died in prison.
At least 2 others died in prison due to harsh conditions, disease, neglect. Dozens more languished in jail for months without trial, enduring hardship, losing property, emerging ruined and ostracized. Imagine the psychological trauma on survivors, children watching parents accused, families torn apart, impoverished, effects rippled through generations.
In the years that followed, there were efforts to right some wrongs, acknowledge the injustice, but it was a long, slow process.
Yes, there was a reckoning, though it took time, and not everyone received justice. January 14, 1697, Judge Samuel Sewell, one of the magistrates, made a remarkable, courageous public apology. Stood before God and the congregation of Boston's Old South Church, admitting guilt, asking forgiveness. A singular act of public repentance.
The only judge to do so.
Notably, yes, highlighting others' reluctance to admit fault. Then, in 1702, the General Court of Massachusetts officially declared the trials unlawful. Crucial step in delegitimizing the process.
And did they attempt to clear the victims' names? Must have been incredibly important for families.
They did, but piecemeal, protracted. A decade later, 1711, the Colonial legislature annulled convictions of 22 named individuals, restored rights, good names, provided small compensation to some families.
But not everyone.
Didn't cover everyone. Official exoneration for remaining victims continued into the modern era. Massachusetts formally exonerated all remaining individuals as recently as 2001, almost 3 centuries later. Despite official acknowledgments, comprehensive monetary reparations for all descendants have largely not been forthcoming. Some wounds unhealed, some injustices financially unaddressed.
So after all this, what did Salem teach us? The enduring legacy, lasting impact beyond facts. Practical lessons for us today.
Salem left an indelible mark on American legal and social thought. A powerful, constant warning, highlighted with brutal clarity the crucial importance of due process, right to legal counsel, sworn witnesses excluding subjective, unprovable evidence like spectral testimony, saying this is a stark reminder of mass hysteria dangers, fear-mongering, persecuting innocents based on unsubstantiated accusations.
Did it change beliefs?
It contributed to the waning of dominant Puritan influence, a gradual diminishing belief in widespread active witchcraft. Unexpectedly, it even impacted scientific methodology, particularly in paranormal research, by highlighting the influence of demand characteristics on testimony. Pushed for more rigorous, objective methods. The eventual end of the trials, the apologies, underscore that even in entrenched systems, a critical mass of dissent, especially when personal stakes rise, can force a return to rationality, justice.
When the other became us.
Exactly. When hysteria threatened the established order, the comfortable distance for scapegoating disappeared. Force those in power to confront the injustice, take action. Suggests hysteria contains seeds of its own undoing, especially when threatening the powerful. Highlights importance of courageous individuals like Sewell standing against the tide. Eventual slow triumph of reason over delusion. A blueprint for recovery.
And the long-term societal impacts.
Legal reforms, its enduring allegorical use, demonstrate a collective societal learning curve.
Yeah.
Dangers of unchecked power, fragility of rights, insidious nature of fear-driven narratives. Trials declared unlawful, convictions annulled, rights restored, spectral evidence banned. Led to dramatic reduction in convictions. Historical memory of Salem consistently invoked as warning against bogus witch hunts, allegory for events like McCarthyism. Highlighting absence of due process rights. Indicates painful lessons were internalized. Led to concrete legal changes, shift in societal consciousness about justice. Salem's memory serves as constant reminder of potential for abuse when legal safeguards erode. Fear dictates policy. Became a foundational cautionary tale in American legal social thought. Contributed to stronger due process protections, greater skepticism towards unsubstantiated accusations.
This deep dive into the Salem Witch Trials serves as a stark reminder. Devastating consequences when fear, fueled by societal anxieties, rigid ideologies, overrides reason, justice, compassion. A powerful, uncomfortable mirror for us today.
The core lessons learned remain critically relevant. Fragility of justice, paramount importance of due process, right to counsel, excluding subjective evidence like spectral testimony. Events underscore insidious nature of mass hysteria, how collective fear leads rational individuals to commit grave injustices. Expose dangerous scapegoating, how marginalized groups, deviants, become first targets in crisis. Above all, Salem reveals terrifying power of accusation itself, especially when incentivized, unchecked, capable of ruining lives without tangible proof.
The parallels between Salem and modern witch hunts are frequently drawn, something you should consider deeply. Think of McCarthyism in the 50s. Careers destroyed by unsubstantiated accusations of disloyalty. Or even more recently, online shaming campaigns. A single, unverified social media post unleashes outrage, cancellation, reputational ruin without due process. Or consider intense political polarization today. Truths, dictated by partisan echo chambers, opposing viewpoints demonized, not debated. The mechanisms of accusation, rapid spread of unverified claims in Salem bear striking resemblances to disinformation, conspiracy theories in our digital age. Subjective evidence, divorced from fact, quickly gains traction, ruins reputation.
Indeed. The enduring allegorical power of Salem signifies the underlying human vulnerabilities. Societal dynamics exposed in 1692 aren't just historical relics. They're persistent threats to rational discourse, democratic principles. If Salem were truly unique, an anomaly, its relevance would diminish. But its consistent use as a metaphor suggests the core mechanisms: fear, accusation, search for simple explanations, breakdown of rational thought are deeply embedded in human nature, societal structures.
Meaning we have to stay vigilant.
Perpetually vigilant. The lessons from Salem aren't a one-time inoculation against historical error. They're a continuous requirement for critical thinking, robust legal protections, unwavering commitment to truth. Especially in an era of rapid information dissemination, heightened social tension. Understanding Salem isn't merely academic. It's a vital act of historical empathy, a call to critical thinking, urging you to recognize echoes of the past in the present, to safeguard against similar miscarriages of justice in any form. It's a reminder that the seeds of a witch hunt can lie dormant in any community, awaiting the right conditions to bloom into terror.